It's LaTravian McCutcheon who's trying to take it in for the pick six, and he does.
It's a pull-up. Flemings. Oh, he wanted it, and he got it.
Talk about onion stacked chin.
Pressure again off the edge. Wigman has Koziel. He's got room to run. Touchdown.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott Horn Podcast. Back here, late stages of August. The calendar creeps closer and closer to the return of Cougar football. We don't have the return of Cougar football this week, though we do have the return of college football. Bobby, I'm actually a little sad that I'm going to be in an airplane for most of the week 0 slate, including the annual, somewhat entertaining game they have out in Ireland. That is always, or at least in recent years, has always been the first college football game that we get to watch here. But we got a new Cougar sport returning, and tonight we got plenty of Big 12 football to talk about. We're going to use this episode to take a larger look at the 2026 Big 12 season and the teams that the Cougs will be competing against in their conference. Another Cougar sport back in action. We'll find some time to talk some Cougar soccer tonight as well. Not single-digit days until the return of Cougar football yet, Bobby, so it hasn't really hit me, but we're almost there. We're chugging along week by week, and before we know it, we'll have fall sports fully back and college football fully back in our lives, and what an awesome time that will be, amigo.
Yeah, man, can't wait. It feels nice to just be able to pop on a U of H sporting event, even, women's soccer or volleyball's coming up. It's just fantastic.
Right, we're back in the sports season. We're back in that
sir.
that awesome 8 or 9 months of the year that we enjoy here so much. Gonna mention here at the top before we get to the Cougar topics du jour. If you want to support the work that we do here on a weekly basis, please go to patreon.com/SH podcast. Is a labor of love. We both have jobs and things we like to do in our lives that we put on at least somewhat of a hold to do this weekly Houston Cougar Sports podcast because we love talking with each other here about the Cougs. We love bringing a weekly show about everything going on in the University of Houston sports world to you, the wonderful people that have listened to us for all these years. If you don't do so already and want to support the work that we do, please, one more time, go to patreon.com/SH podcast. And if you're one of the not small number of people who already do that, I want to reiterate how much we appreciate you, the people that do so, because that support keeps us coming back here week in, week out and talking about those Houston Cougars. Before we get to the topics I mentioned at the beginning here, the Big 12 preview, volleyball season preview, a little soccer as well, we did have some pretty timely Cougar football related news that we'll say a happy prayer did not break a day after we recorded our show, broke a couple days here before we recorded on Tuesday night. That would be a couple of new additions, or in one case, a new old addition to the 2026 Cougar football roster. As you'd expect from the time in recent news, both of these roster additions are guys who started their college careers in the year 2022 and under the old system would have exhausted their college eligibility after last season. But thanks to a myriad of different, sometimes conflicting court rulings, had been grandfathered into the new 5-5 college eligibility system, or at least they are as of August 25th. I think it is always important to at least somewhat date what you're doing as a point in time, in case things change. And I don't think there's anything that we're going to talk about here tonight that is more at risk of potentially being quite different a week from now than this. But we'll talk about these two new Cougs, both exciting. We'll start with the newer of the two guys, safety Myles Rowser, who played the past 2 seasons at Arizona State 2 seasons ago on what was the 2024 Big 12 champions. He led the Arizona State defense with 98 total tackles, earned honorable mention, all Big 12 honors, and in the most recent season, earned third team all Big 12 honors, where he finished with 64 total tackles. Also was previously a starter in all conference selection for New Mexico State, was part of that 10-win NMSU team. That I believe that was the most wins in over 60 years in that program. That was Diego Pavia's last season. in the Aggie program. If you'll recall, the familiar face out of this new duo is receiver Stephon Johnson Jr., been a part of the Cougar program the past 3 seasons. You probably remember him if you're a Cougar fan listening to this show. His most recent season got off to a bit of a slow start, but it really felt like he was starting to find his feet. He had the longest Cougar touchdown of last season. We caught a 74-yard bomb for a touchdown against Rice. Caught a touchdown that comeback win over Oregon State. Was averaging just over 21 yards per catch when he went down with a season-ending Liz Franck injury in his foot. In the 5th game he played last season, was ultimately denied a medical redshirt by the NCAA. And like Rowser, he joins a veteran position group, but one that he only makes stronger with his presence. Talked plenty on these two guys, Bobby. Give me your thoughts on these 2 later fall camp additions.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with Rowser is you bring him into a safety room that is already stacked, right? You already have a really good safety room. We talked last week about how good the secondary is, and all you do is just add another Big 12 all Big 12 player, which is pretty good, man. I think what interests me here is why he came here and why you brought in yet another safety. On one end, you can kind of look at it and go, am I concerned because, maybe the depth isn't there like you thought it was or something crazy like that? You can kind of talk yourself into something there. Something that might be a little interesting is will he could somebody in that safety room kind of move over into a linebacker position, a position that you and I both kind of talked about, like could maybe use a little bit of depth, and while it's going to be good up top, it could do something to raise the floor. Maybe when he was in one of those summer camp invites, a mini camp invite, they kind of were like, you're a tweener for us because he's kind of a big hitter, things like that. So interesting to see if maybe you get a little bit of depth in the linebacker position, or if you're going to continue to just play safeties. Do you put him at corner? Like, what does that look like? I am interested in that. But anytime you bring in a guy with this much talent, you can't complain. Even if you don't know where the piece is going to fit into the puzzle perfectly, you can still find a place for him. And then with Stephon Johnson coming back, super excited for that. It's another weapon that we're gonna have in the wide receiver room, and another guy for Connor Wigman to get the ball to. I don't think this is going to be a situation where you're concerned with having too many playmakers and who's going to get the ball here, and is there going to be some infighting. I think you kind of tell Boogie, look, we had planned without you. We're super glad to have you here. We're going to get you the ball as much as we can when it fits into the system. And, he may have been able to transfer somewhere else or do something like that, and he agreed to it. I think, again, he may not know exactly where you fit. You built the team without him, and you brought in guys that, to replace him. But still, at the end of the day, he's got a lot of talent, and I'd love to see him out on the field with the ball in his hand. So I'm super excited for both of these additions.
Yeah, to what you said about Rowser, he could be that guy, honestly, at linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I saw about him was not that he can't cover. It was his work in the run defense as a safety. And I could very much see him being that guy. If anything, also to what you said, the fact that the receiver and safety groups are already pretty strong future proofs you against something I alluded to here as we introduced this topic, that for these guys' sake, I hope not, but there's the chance there's some kind of court ruling or something that keeps you from using these specific 5th-year players. It's entirely possible, because 2 months ago, you wouldn't have necessarily thought that we'd be having an August full of injunctions and TROs and guys, which it doesn't apply to either of these guys, to be clear, guys going from being in an NFL camp to trying to play a 5th season on a college roster, which, again, reiterate, does not apply to either of these guys. The most these guys got in terms of this most recent offseason and a pro sniff was kind of the very cursory rookie mini camps. Neither guy was actually on the 90-man or in any NFL team's specific camp. Willie Fritz also mentioned with Stephon Johnson how excited the guys were to have him back, that he was a good locker room guy, that he was a really positive, because remember, he was not brought in by this staff. His first year in the program was actually the last year under Dana Holgorsen. I actually caught the Hail Mary on the very famous Donovan Smith Hail Mary that you and I watched in my living room out in Vegas as the Cougs got their first ever Big 12 football win over West Virginia. And that he's been one of those holdovers that's been a really positive culture kind of guy. So from that perspective too, I think you could be really excited. And you aren't metaphorically living or dying with either guy at each position group, if that makes sense. You'd love to have them, but if unfortunately you couldn't use either of these guys for some, conference ruling, some court ruling, something that prevents them from getting on the field, you're ultimately okay at receiver without Stephon Johnson if that's what happens. You're ultimately okay at safety if you don't have Myles Rowser, if that's what happens, which I think makes it such a good ad in both cases, really.
Yeah, it was. There's when you look at this, it's really hard to find any kind of negative, right? You look at it and you go, "What is the negative here?" And I'm not sure. Despite me trying to find one, it was really hard to find one because, like you said, if for some reason they are ruled ineligible, which, let's be honest, I wouldn't disagree with. I'd be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. NCAA, I wouldn't be Texas Tech
since we sat down, we did it. So to give you an idea of how fast this stuff moves, we sat down 4:00 my time, Pacific time. We did an interview for next week's pod, which we're excited for you guys to hear when we preview Oregon State and do all that jazz. In the time we sat down, Bobby, the SEC put out a ruling saying schools are not allowed to use, but this wouldn't, in an alternate reality where U of H is in the SEC, this would not apply, but talked about, hey, if a player has been on a roster, which included, I believe, like training camp rosters, they're not allowed to play like on a team, which I'm sure will lead to more lawsuits. I'm sure will lead to more billable hours, but that's how fast this kind of stuff moves.
Yeah, it's who knows what could happen by the time we finish this. So yeah, for sure. I think the point you made of if for some reason they can't play, it's not the end of the world.
Exactly. The same kind that we said about Kendall Weaver and Cougar men's basketball a couple weeks ago when he was added to that roster. Like, love to have him, but ultimately your ceiling isn't drastically lowered by not having this player if something that you can't control changes.
Yep.
So we to our first main topic, because this year's August lead-in is a bit longer. As you'll remember, by last year's calendar, we were actually playing football games this week. Kind of wish we were now, Bobby. Don't love whoever at the calendar company is in charge of Labor Day being on September 7th this year. I think that's it's kind of crap. I'm going to speak to someone's manager about this, but we had the ability to do a slightly longer lead into the season, and that allowed us a luxury that didn't have last year, which is to actually use a segment here to take a longer look at the Big 12 football season to come. We're not going to be breaking down all 15 non-U of H teams because, frankly, that would be more Big 12 football than even we were interested in discussing here. So how we're going to do this is lead in the same way that we did last year when we talked about the Big 12, talking about the Big 12 football team who we think is getting too much preseason hype, and the Big 12 team that we believe is flying a bit under the radar, who maybe could surprise people. Bobby, start by giving me your team who you think is getting way too much preseason hype, and of course any stray big picture Big 12 thoughts you would want to lead with as well.
Yeah, I think my the team I think is overrated. The one I'm going to go with for overrated here. It may sound weird considering the season they had last year, but I'm going to go with Oklahoma State. And the reason why I'm going to go Oklahoma State is I think they'll have one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12, and that offense will be very good. That being said, the North Texas program couldn't stop anybody. Their defense was bad most years that they were there under Eric Morris, and it was never that good. And if this was 2009-ish to 2015-ish Big 12, then yeah, sure, let's have some fun and offense says go and you're winning games 70-56 kind of deal. But that's not the Big 12 anymore. We got some decent defenses here. Texas Tech's going to have a really good defense. The Cougs are going to have a really good defense. I think you're going to see some really good defensive performances, and they just don't stop anybody. Eric Morris hasn't shown the ability to have a defense to do that yet. Add that into the ability for him to just I think the offense is going to be good, but I'm seeing people put them in Arlington and be a dark horse candidate to go to Arlington. And I think if you just buy into the offense, yeah, sure. Like I absolutely think that offense is going to be one of the better offenses in the Big 12. But how are they going to stop teams? I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. I think a lot of the sexiness comes from the quarterback, comes from Eric Morris, comes from that offense that North Texas had last year. But if you recall, I can't remember the final score, but they got absolutely dog walked by, I believe, USF last year
You are correct.
in a big home game. I think they gave up like 56 or something like that, lost by
I
17.
looked it up. They gave up 63.
No, I was off by a touchdown. I mean, they got
Yeah, you were too
absolutely
generous
dog
to their
walked.
defense.
Yes. And so that's why I think they're going to be overrated. I think they're going to be way better than they were last year. I think that team was horror terror awful last year, but I don't see them. People are saying they could win like 10 games this year. 7-5, 8-4 is a massive improvement, and I think that's reasonable. So that's why I have them in the overrated spot right now.
I'm completely with you on this one, actually. I do think they're going to be simultaneously one of the most improved teams in the country, both for wins and losses, for on-field performance, and that I think some of the North Texas adjacent hype here is getting a bit over its skis. And actually, I like their defensive coordinator, Skylar Cassidy. So you mentioned it. They were a disaster defensively before the last year or two under Eric Morris. That Cassidy got them to respectable with an offense that we'll say isn't defense friendly. If you recall the U of H offenses of 15, 16, 17 years ago, they weren't friendly to the defense. Like you're scoring quickly, you're passing a lot. That can kind of, I think, artificially create problems for your defense. So grading that curve, they improved a lot. That allowed them to be good enough that Eric Morris was actually able to get consideration and ultimately hired by Oklahoma State for this job. But I'm with you. There's a step up here, and there are some fundamental flaws that, as good as I expect their offense to be, as improved as I think they will be on the whole, I think it's still gotten some people a little bit too willing to believe this team's going to come in with a whole bunch of North Texas guys and just run the Big 12. I don't see it, though. Like you, I think I see them being pretty seriously improved. For my team getting too much preseason hype, I wanted so badly to have this be Texas Tech. So badly. And I do believe some of the preseason hype around the Red Raiders underestimates what they lost on the defensive side of the ball. Specifically, their stud pass rusher, David Bailey, was an absolute freak. I don't think they could have possibly replaced David Bailey like for like with anyone in the portal. Even if they got the best defensive lineman in the portal, there just was not a David Bailey out there. And there will not be a David Bailey on this roster. They also graduated their emotional leader, another really good linebacker, Jacob Rodriguez, a number of other defensive linemen, not named David Bailey, who got drafted as well, who were really good, who are no longer on this team. And of course, their drama at quarterback, the abbreviated Texas Tech career of sports betting enthusiast Brendan Sorsby, and the serious injury that's looming over their projected starting quarterback, Will Hammond. The problem with picking Tech here is that their schedule is really, really easy. They're not going to lose to ACU, Sam Houston, or Oregon State in non-conference. And their toughest projected teams in Big 12 play, which I would say are U of H, Arizona State, and Arizona, all come to Lubbock. Bobby, their toughest road game is probably Oklahoma State. Maybe Baylor if Oklahoma State is less improved that you and I and various other people think they could be. So I want to talk myself so badly into them falling on their faces, but I don't believe the schedule allows it. I believe the schedule sets the floor here at 10 to 11 wins for them. So my answer here is Utah. I still believe they'll be a top half, maybe top third of the Big 12 team. I think the floor for the Utes is going to be pretty high on defense, even with a few guys from last year's team no longer there. Their head coach, Morgan Scalley, was their longtime defensive coordinator. I have a hard time not seeing their defense being pretty good. The big question mark and why I think they're a little overrated at this point is offense. I see a lot of preseason stuff about how they returned their starting quarterback, Devin Dampier, their super sub quarterback, Bird Ficklin, and that's not nothing. But last year was their first good offensive season in a good bit, at least several years. And the play caller for that offense, Jason Beck, who is also Dampier's OC at New Mexico 2 seasons ago when he was very good there, he's now at Michigan. He's now working for former Utah head coach Kyle Whittingham there. And they hired Utah State's OC, and he has a solid resume. I may be underestimating the guy, but his resume isn't anything unbelievable. And I have reservations about how good the offense will be with a first-time head coach who has a defensive background, because that usually does not correlate with offensive success. No guarantee, but quite often you see first-year head coaches who have mainly a defensive background isn't conducive to the offense being very adventurous or very good. This isn't me predicting Utah to go 5-7 or something like that. They also have a pretty friendly schedule in conference play, but I don't see them going to Arlington with all of the offensive question marks I just said.
Yeah, that was one I considered it as well. So I totally get everything you're throwing down there.
Bobby, who is the team you do not think is getting enough respect in the Big 12 here in the preseason?
I'll be honest, this was a little tough for me just because, to be honest with you, there's this like middle ground that everyone kind of thinks there's going to be. Everyone's going to be pretty close to the same, right? Like that's TCU, maybe Baylor's a little bit lower, but Oklahoma State's kind of in here a little bit, maybe a little bit higher. But the team I went with was Cincy, which might sound a little shocking, but they don't get a ton of love. And I'm not saying they're going to make a run to Arlington and beat Tech and just go out and just dominate and make everyone look bad. But
the Sorsby revenge game that didn't end up actually being a Sorsby revenge game. If Cincy won, that'd be the biggest Bearcat fan. Sorry.
And I think Cincy even named it like their homecoming game, if I recall correctly. Like they were going all out for that game. But the reason why I think they'll be a little bit better than people think is their offensive and defensive lines are actually pretty good. And that's a great place to start if you're going to look to upset some teams. I was never really a Sorsby guy, as I think I've said on this podcast that I thought he was doo-doo from a butt in terms of his quarterback play. I never understood why he was the number one transfer quarterback. And so I personally don't see much of a quarterback fall off from them. The schedule is brutal with trips to Arizona, Houston, and BYU. That's rough. But I do think they will play a lot of teams tougher than people are kind of giving them credit for heading into the season.
That's interesting. I think you had Cincy as the overhyped team last year, so I love the parallel of Cincy going from overhyped to disrespected here.
Look, you go overhyped because you have Brendan Sorsby and everyone thinks you're good, and then you're underrated because you lose Brendan Sorsby and nobody thinks you're going to be good.
Yeah, their quarterback intrigues me too. J.C. French comes over from Georgia Southern, veteran guy. I could absolutely talk myself into him at least like equaling what Sorsby did there last year as well. Like you got me thinking about it.
Exactly. Don't think it's going to be a huge drop off. It might be some, but I don't think they're going to suddenly crater with that quarterback play.
I don't believe the team I'm about to say here will contend for the Big 12, at least not this season to come, but I'm going with Kansas here. They didn't fall back to where they were before head coach Lance Leipold took the job in these past two seasons, but I think it should be a credit to what he's done that Kansas going 5-7 back-to-back seasons is actually kind of disappointing now from Kansas Jayhawk football. Bobby, this program won a combined 9 American football games from the 2015 through the 2020 season. That is because they played most of the scheduled games during the COVID season. That is most of 6 seasons, and they won 9 games. Like, can you imagine? Our buddy Andy we've had on a couple times. Can you imagine being Andy and just being like every Saturday, like, all right, I'm getting hyped for Kansas football, and they're gonna win just under 2 games per season. Like, that's how dire it's been, and that's how much. And it's not just Lance Leipold. Like, they just redid their stadium. Like, they've put a lot of money into the program. Like, they're a much more serious operation now than they were a decade or so ago when they were just really mired in not being very good. But Leipold gets a big credit for that. And the real reason why I'm so bullish on Kansas taking a step forward this season, they're bringing back Leipold's longtime OC. I mean, long time, like he was back with Leipold when he was the head coach at D3 Wisconsin Whitewater, Andy Kotelnicki, who is back here after being the OC at Penn State the past 2 seasons. They did lose their program icon quarterback, Jalen Daniels. And I won't pretend like that's nothing, but he also spent a lot of these past 2 seasons struggling to stay healthy. They have 2 quarterbacks who saw action, I think previously as backups, who I think are the best candidates to win the job. They also brought in Rice starting quarterback from last year, Chase Jenkins. I think this is going to go back to what this team was in 22 and 23 when Leipold was kind of first turning this into a respectable Big 12 program. They also brought in all-purpose guy Dylan Edwards, who previously played for Colorado and K-State. One of those guys who was an elite recruit but has never quite put it all together. But worth remembering, 2 seasons ago, he had over 7 yards a carry at K-State. I think he's a good fit for what's going to be a run-first offense that I remember from facing it or seeing the Cougs face it is really a nightmare to prepare for on your usual week-to-week in the season cycle. Maybe that's just me remembering my fan trauma from the 2022 game, but they use a lot of motion. They do a lot of stuff that if you're not really fundamentally sound, if you're not really certain of where you need to be on the football field, they're just going to tear you limb from limb. It's a really fun offense to watch if it's not coming at the expense of your not very good defense, like we experienced about 4 years ago to the month. In terms of record, I don't know if they'll be drastically improved off of 5-7, but I think they'll be back in a bowl, and I think they'll be pointing towards a 2027 where they're going to be a team capable of finishing in the top 5 or 6 in the league. I think this is the season where they build towards that. They were kind of in this weird spot the last 2 years. You could tell the offense, it wasn't everything it could be because you didn't have Jalen Daniels healthy or in some cases available at all. It wasn't everything it could be because it just didn't have the same juices it did when Kalanick was calling plays. I think that's important too. More questions about the defense, but I think somebody on KU's schedule, in my opinion, BYU late in the regular season is a good candidate, is going to be handed an unpleasant upset loss in Lawrence. I admit this is more of a vibes-based prediction than the kind I would usually make, but when I looked at all the teams that I thought were candidates to be underrated coming into the season, KU really jumped off the page at me, and thus they were my pick here. Believe it or not, I also considered Colorado for this one. Much as
I did too.
Deion's results without his son and Travis Hunter have not been very good, they made a good offensive coordinator hire in Brennan Marion. They brought in some interesting transfers, but that felt like more of a long shot. But it was enough that I at least said that I would mention it here before we got done with this specific segment.
Yeah, agreed wholeheartedly. I absolutely looked at them as well. I think the thing that kind of caught my initial attention is just some of the things Deion's been saying about his quarterback. I can't remember his name.
Juju Lewis, I believe.
Yes, I think that's right. And he's been talking him up big time. Almost like saying things that he was saying about Travis Hunter and other players. So
Scudero, that receiver from San Jose State too, that was a big one.
Yeah, they got some good players. Colorado is certainly one of those teams where if you have them on your schedule and you go into a game favored by 10, you win by 6, you feel lucky.
Yeah, exactly. I'm having been on the receiving end of UNLV's offense 2 season openers ago now. I mean, yeah, certainly not underestimating Brennan Marion and the go-go offense there. Said at the top, we're not previewing all 15 non-U of H teams in the Big 12, both because of the time involved, and I think going to that level on each team goes outside of our purview as a University of Houston sports podcast, first and foremost. But we want to take an effort to get to know some of the non-U of H football programs and what they will bring to the table for the 2026 season. We did a little Big 12 roulette. I had the 15 non-U of H teams in a randomized order and then had a random number generator select 2 teams for each of us. I did not rig this to give Bobby teams he didn't like because, frankly, it would be 1,000 times funnier if he organically ended up with a team he didn't like, which he did, as Bobby drew Baylor, very funny, and TCU, which is not as funny, I'll admit. I am kind of glad we organically ended up with 2 of the Texas teams. I think that's more of what our listeners are probably most interested in is the other Texas schools, and I'm glad we got to actually get that without rigging it so we have other Texas schools among ours. I also drew K-State and UCF, the other team that would have been very funny for you to draw specifically. And how we're going to talk about each of our teams is we're going to give our buy, our sell, and our hold. The buy is something we're convinced the team is going to do well or a good player, something that we're generally positive about with that team. The sell is the opposite, something we think is going to be a potential problem or weakness for this team in the coming season. And the hold is a question we have, but not necessarily one with a negative answer, just a preseason question. One of those things could kind of go either way. Bobby, I'll lead with the team, if you don't mind me starting this off. The team that you love to call the University of Central Florida Golden Knights.
I don't call them. I don't love to call them that. That's their name.
Quick aside, I will not get rid of it. I remember last year, and I am one of the last people to defend Bill Belichick, UNC head coach. Like, the man's pro resume speaks for itself. Like, fine, whatever. But like, this year plus has been, I think at best, very, very embarrassing for UNC, and at worst, maybe one of the worst hires any school has ever made. But there were UCF fans freaking out because he referred to them as Central Florida when he was talking about them in a preview press conference. And it's just like, that's 2/3 of your name. Like, I know your marketing people like to be called, like, it would be like if we for some reason didn't want to be called, I don't know, Houston,
University of Houston.
University
we
of
just
Houston.
wanted to be called.
It's your name. Like fine, you don't like the Golden Knights because that's your old mascot, and you want to be the Knights now because it's a little punchier. Like, fine, like, whatever. But like, getting mad at people calling you your full government name is laughable. But steer this on track. Brief background: second year under new/old head coach Scott Frost back in Orlando after a pretty forgettable tenure at his alma mater, University of Nebraska. This is obviously a program that holds Frost in high regard. He oversaw the 2017 season where UCF went 13-0, won the AAC, and then awarded themselves a national championship. Little tougher start to Frost's second tenure in Orlando, but I don't think 5-7 last season was UCF drastically underachieving their preseason expectations. My buy here is the Knights defense, which frankly is the only reason they were even within spitting distance of bowl eligibility last season. They hired former USC and Oklahoma defensive coordinator Alex Grinch to run their defense. Not someone beloved by either of those fan bases I just named, but not to also mention a boogeyman from the Houston Cougar past, former Applewhite era defensive coordinator Mark D'Onofrio is the Knights linebackers coach. Somehow, Bobby, this brain trust actually created one of the better defenses in the Big 12 last season. They weren't perfect, but if you had paired last season's Knights defense with a somewhat above average or better offense, they would have gone to a bowl and probably cleared it pretty easily. They do lose first round draft pick Malachi Lawrence, who's not an easy guy to replace, but returned 4 stars in the secondary, including Damari Henderson, who had 61 tackles at safety last season, starting quarterbacks Antoine Jackson, Jaden Bellamy as well. And even with Lawrence's departure up front, they still return tackle RJ Jackson, who I believe was preseason all Big 12. So hardly devoid of talent in the front too. I mean, there are other questions to answer on this team, but I looked at UCF and I'm confident this is a defense good enough to keep the Knights around in games. My hold here, and this was almost a buy, is their new starting quarterback, 50-year James Madison transfer, Alonzo Barnett III. Last season helped the Dukes reach the college football playoff and winning the Sun Belt. If Barnett was coming into a situation with a really proven supporting cast and a sharp offensive mind as head coach, this would have been my buy. As much as I liked UCF's defense for all the reasons I just said, his JMU body of work is really strong. In addition to the overall accomplishments I just mentioned, he was the 2025 Sun Belt Player of the Year, threw for 23 touchdowns and rushed for 15. Not an explosive runner per se, but certainly can get tough yards with his legs. And the stats back that up. He's good at finding the end zone. Like I just mentioned, 15 rushing touchdowns when he calls his own number. In the run game, my concern is the supporting cast. The Knights only returned 1 O-lineman from last season. They bring in some transfers to that group, but nobody who was super established from their previous school. They didn't bring in a group like U of H has, where it's like, okay, well, they brought in 3 all-conference guys. I see what they're getting at. I could see this group coming together and being as good as what they had or better than what they had last year. And this is light criticism of Barnett because I want to be clear. I think he's a good player and a massive upgrade over the black hole they had at the position last season. But you can make a case he was a pretty good quarterback on a very good team with a really, really good G6 supporting cast last season, which is not comparable to the situation he's walking into at UCF. I also have questions about the offensive scheme, which leads me, Bobby, to my sell. Do you know how many winning seasons a Scott Frost team has won more games than it's lost over the entirety of the season? He's been a head coach for 7+ seasons. He got fired early his last season at Nebraska. So he's been 7+ seasons. How many winning seasons as a head coach does this guy have, Bobby?
I think 1 or 2. 1. I'll go with 1.
It's that 2017 season. That's literally the only season he has had where a team he's been the head coach of has won more games than it's lost. And that was a legitimately great team. You almost have to be in order to go 13-0. To dig further, the only teams that have been able to get the 6 wins you need to get to a bowl game were his first 2 teams at UCF, 2016 and 2017. Or I guess his only 2 teams his first go around at UCF. Everything about this hire reminds me in the most derogatory way possible of when we hired Dana Holgorsen. It's a program hiring somebody who oversaw some exciting teams from the past, who scored a bunch of points, but he's also a head coach whose recent results don't speak to someone who's on the cutting edge as an offensive mind anymore. Doesn't speak to somebody who has the same, fastball as a play caller as he did back when his teams were previously good. And I almost think this comparison is kind of unfair to Holgorsen, who had multiple double-digit wins at West Virginia. I mean, you just look at Scott Frost's resume, it almost feels like the 2017 season was just a lucky flash in the pan. And what this guy is generally is just not a very good head coach. I mean, you talk about head coaches who wouldn't get a sniff at any other program but the one they got hired to. That's Scott Frost to a T. Mm-hmm. And it's some of the same failures that doomed Holgorsen here, insisting on being the guy running the offense, even though the game has clearly passed him by. I almost kind of feel bad for this defense and Alonzo Barnett. In a more competent head coach's hands, I do think UCF's floor is actually 6 or 7 wins and certainly not being a Big 12 pushover. I don't know if I see it here, and I'll refuse to believe it until he actually does it in a season this decade.
I think that's fair. I think the Holgorsen comparison is a really good one in terms of a guy who oversaw some really good teams, but went somewhere else and just didn't really do it. I mean, Holgorsen was really good here and oversaw some great offenses, some incredible offenses, but I don't know if he was necessarily a great head coach at West Virginia. And you hired a guy who probably, to your point, wasn't going to get hired anywhere else or was going to take a job at a lower level than a Big 12 job, and you brought him in. So I hope it doesn't work out for them.
Bobby, keep us going with whichever of your duo you would like to lead us with here.
Yeah, only because I started my notes with them for some reason, is I'm going to go with Texas Christian University over in Fort Worth, good old funky town. For my bye, I'd like to say their defensive line. Their defensive line loses 1 contributor off last year's team. They returned 7 of those 8 guys from last year. They also brought in a transfer from Texas Tech. It should be a really good defensive line. It was a pretty solid defensive line last year. They do lose their top sack getter, but he was a linebacker, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. But they did lose him, which is unfortunate, but he's now currently playing for the Buffalo Bills. But I think this defensive line could be really good for the Horned Frogs this year. So my bye is just kind of watch them. And it may not be sexy defensive line play either. It may not be a bunch of sacks and them getting to the quarterback all the time. But a lot of defensive line play, we focus a lot on sacks and we focus a lot on tackles. Your defensive line is more than that. If you're just falling at the quarterback's feet, just if he's having to rush just a little bit, you've got a really good chance to just disrupt the offensive play. Not to, go back and talk about old things in the past, but you look at some of the great quarterbacks, and you didn't have to sack them a lot. Like I always think of Brady in those Super Bowls versus the Giants, the 2 that he lost. The way they got to him was pressure up the middle. Was you put a hand in his face. It wasn't guys coming off the edge necessarily. It was collapsing the pocket from the middle, and I think that's what TCU is going to do this year. You may not be amazed by their sack totals. I mean, their leading sack getter last year had 4.5 sacks. That's not a ton, but overall, I think you're just going to see them be very disruptive. So I am buying the TCU defensive line this year. And then my hold is actually going to be their secondary. They actually had a stud freshman last year that their fans seem really excited for. named Gil Jackson. He played in all 12 games, and to play in all 12 games at the Big 12 level, you have to be pretty good, especially in this conference. There's some good wide receivers in this conference. He wasn't their number one guy last year, but they're definitely looking for him to step up this season in that secondary and make a huge, huge difference in letting that really good defensive line kind of get out into the quarterback's pressure. But overall, I think the secondary could be pretty good. Does Gil have a sophomore slump? I think that's going to be a big question that needs to be answered. So that's why I'm holding there versus buying. If I think if Gil Jackson had that same level of performances that he had his freshman year and he did it his sophomore and junior year, then it's definitely kind of a buy situation. But he's still young, still trying to learn systems and do things like that. So but to play 12 games, like I said, is really good. So I'm holding the TCU secondary and in particular Gil Jackson there. And then for selling, it's kind of weird to talk about TCU and not talk offense considering their head coach, but I have zero faith in the linebacker core that they have. They lose their number 1, their number 3, and their number 6 tacklers from last year. They also lose their leading sack getter in Elarm Zor. Losing 4 guys like that is tough for any defense. They did bring in Michael Short from Virginia Tech, and he wasn't bad at Virginia Tech, but he didn't really jump off the page when I was kind of looking at his stats and kind of what he did. He's on his 3rd school in 3 years. He got less playing time last year at North Carolina than he did he got less playing time last year at Virginia Tech than he did the year before at North Carolina. Kind of a weird situation where his coaches get fired the year he plays for them. And so I wouldn't be shocked if they are decent, right? But it's just going to depend on their depth. You like I said, you bring in a guy from Virginia Tech, not that Virginia Tech defense was known for just absolutely locking guys down, and he kind of couldn't break out onto the field much for them. He played in a couple of games, but like I said, on his 3rd school in 3 years, he's not doing anything to impress new head coaches. When they come in, they kind of want him gone. He enters the transfer portal. That's going to kind of be the guy that you're leaning on in your linebacker class this year in terms of transfers. When you lose that much talent, I'm going to have to sell that TCU linebacking core.
Yeah, the only thing about TCU is that if I was doing them, I'd probably have their offense as a whole. It intrigues me. And I think it'll be better than what Kendall Briles did. Like, as much as Josh Hoover could be an electric quarterback, they just couldn't do things consistently.
In a Kendall Briles offense, I'm shocked.
Couldn't run the ball either, which was I think one of his few consistent value propositions was his teams usually could run the ball pretty well and just could not do with any consistency either of the last 2 seasons. Their OC comes from UConn. Like, they had a pretty good offense there. I think the biggest reason why they had their best season in a while and their head coach was able to get the Colorado State job. So I'm curious about that as well. I just wanted to add that while we're on the subject of TCU.
Love it.
So we'll get to my next team, the Kansas State Wildcats. They new head coach, but one that's a very familiar face around the program. Formerly the K-State offensive coordinator, most recently Texas A&M offensive coordinator, Colin Klein himself, a legendary Wildcat quarterback. A lot of things age me, Bobby, but I really remember Klein as K-State's quarterback in the late aughts, early 2010s when they were briefly number 1 in the country. I remember you and Dustin going up to Waco for K-State Baylor when K-State was the number 1 team in the country and Baylor upset the Cats. I won't get us derailed, but this had me going to Colin Klein's Football Reference page, and it's one of those insane quarterback stat lines that you won't see a QB now do this. In his final 2 seasons at K-State, this was 2011 and 2012, Klein rushed for a combined 50 touchdowns and carried the ball a combined 524 times. Like, that's crazy, man. Like, that's averaging
that's an insane number, man.
That's averaging over 20 carries a game. Not like, he sometimes carried it 20 something time. No, he was averaging over 20 carries per game. I don't think we'll see any quarterback who doesn't play for a service academy take that kind of pounding in the run game this season or any seasons to come in the recent future. But
yeah, absolutely insane number there. He was so much fun to watch
he
too.
was.
Like, and we weren't in the Big 12 at the time, so they weren't really anyone we played. And so it was just kind of fun watching him because you knew Texas and uh Texas Tech and this and Baylor had to play him and were just going to be in for it, and there was always a chance that he would upset them.
So fast forward to the present day Cats. My buy here is Avery Johnson, now going to his third season as the Cats starting quarterback. I've been a believer in him since he was splitting reps with Will Howard 3 years ago as a freshman. And Bobby, I'm ready to get hurt again. I don't believe K-State's biggest problems last season were Johnson when they finished disappointing 6-6. I will say, like, the offense and Johnson probably didn't take the step forward that anyone wanted to, though, last season. There are things he can improve upon. He still hasn't taken the step forward you would want with his accuracy. He still hasn't completed 60% of his passes over any of his 3 college seasons at this point. But the area that was the biggest disappointment last season was probably the run game. Johnson had his lowest yards per carry since he got to college last season. Now he's back playing under Colin Klein, the guy who was his primary recruiter when he was the top high school recruit, when he committed to K-State in the first place. I believe we will see Avery Johnson get back to something closer to the promising player from 2 or 3 seasons ago. We'll say there's one big supporting cast concern that I may or may not be talking about here later, but I do believe Johnson is a much better, more dynamic player than most coaches get to have in their first year on the job. And it helps that there's also going to be a fair amount of familiarity between your new head coach, Colin Klein, and this quarterback. That the familiarity already existed from the moment that Colin Klein got in the head coach's chair here. So that's why I'm buying on Johnson having a good 2026. My hold here is the defensive transfer group that K-State brought in. This is a defense that at times last year struggled in some areas. They were good at getting to the quarterback. They were good at forcing negative plays, but they were one of those defenses that they could create the havoc play, they could create the negative play, but sometimes they would just give up yards and gobs. And defense wasn't the only problem last season. I think the Cats offense was pretty maddeningly up and down. The team was also pretty poor at just finding ways to lose close games, finding ways to commit special teams blunders to lose close games, which special teams is a historic strength of this program. So I'd imagine that stuck in the craw of Cats fans, especially. Elijah Hill comes in off of last year's Conference USA champions, Kennesaw State, led both his team and the entirety of his conference in sacks last season. Wendell Gregory comes from Oklahoma State, where as a redshirt freshman, he was the coach's pick for Big 12 Freshman of the Year, was named third team All-Conference. Definitely one of the few players from last season's OSU team that I would imagine Eric Morris and the staff there would have liked to have held on to for 2026. In the defensive backfield, you bring in Caleb Patterson from Illinois, where he started for some good defenses there, along with Jason Pavard, who should start at safety after earning honorable mention All ACC honors at Virginia last season for a good defense. Virginia's best team in several years there as well, so he'll be a good one to watch there. There's always some risk and volatility on relying on a large group of transfers, and K-State also lost some good individuals. I believe one or multiple guys who are playing for Indiana this season, which that's one of those, if Indiana's bringing in a guy, like, okay, like, that's a staff that in a short amount of time has proven they have a good eye for talent. So you probably lost a couple of good players there, which is why this group is a hold for me right now and not a buy. I'm intrigued and could talk myself into it somewhat, but it's going to be something I'm watching with K-State specifically. Going to loom large, like how this defense gels for when the Cougs come to town in October, which will be a pretty pivotal game for both teams involved. My sell here is that supporting cast thing I mentioned a bit ago when we were talking about Avery Johnson. It's the Cats offensive line, because they suffered an injury to every game starter and preseason all Big 12 left tackle John Pastore during fall camp. It sounds like he is out for the season, and because he's a fifth-year guy, that he will be done for his college career. Also sounds like promising Ohio State transfer George Fitzpatrick, who missed last season after an unspecified medical emergency, has still not been cleared to play as of recording. More than any other position group, this one being a question mark really makes me nervous about my earlier optimism around Avery Johnson, because if K-State can't run block, and Avery Johnson is somebody uniquely equipped to handle maybe being under pressure a bit more than most, but you also, and I think he's probably developed some bad habits over his career, from his ability to escape pressure and from maybe being under duress a bit more than you would like your quarterback to be under duress. So it's the offensive line with any offense, no matter how great the scheme, no matter how familiar the coach is with the new quarterback, if the offensive line isn't where you want it to be, it's like having the nicest car in the world, but not being able to start it because your engine's fucked up. Pardon my French there. It will fundamentally sink whatever you have if the offensive line isn't taking care of it. And it's hard to look at these injuries in fall camp, the Pastore specifically, and the question mark that position group already kind of was for this K-State team, and not feel like maybe it lowers the ceiling a bit for what they can achieve offensively in the first season under Colin Klein, in addition to all the first year background stuff that you're always going to have with a new head coach coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and we know what it's like to have a bad offensive line.
We sure do.
We've seen it for a long time. I am a little intrigued with you going with Avery Johnson as a buy, especially after the season he had last year. Not that he was this horrible, terrible quarterback that doesn't deserve to be loved, right? I don't think I didn't think he was that bad last year, but I definitely, if I were doing K-State, probably would have had him on a hold. You've seen a lot of flashes.
I thought about it. Maybe. I did.
Yeah, you've seen a lot of flashes from him, but you've also seen some absolute disasters from him. And so new coaching staff as well. And yes, he is somebody who is used to Kansas State, and he's going to run an offense that Avery Johnson is going to be more than comfortable in my opinion. But still, running your own program, doing things like that can be a little different. So, yeah, I agree with everything you said, though.
I know you're dying to do it, Bobby. Tell us about the Baylor Bears.
Yeah, man, let's talk about them Baylor Baylor Bears fight. For me, I'm going to buy their running back situation. It actually looks really good. They see Dawson Pendergrass return from injury that he had last year, and they have Caden Knighton, which is, by the way, a perfect Baylor name, Caden Knighton. That screams Baylor student. He also returns after a pretty good freshman season. Those two should really open up the offense, and they should open up the offense for the hold portion of this team. And that hold portion is going to be DJ Lagway, their incoming transfer from Florida. Man, I texted you this a couple of weeks ago before I even knew about who the teams were, but I saw that video of all of his interceptions last year, and they were kind of chalking it up whether it was the wide receiver fault or the quarterback's fault. But there were some ugly throws. I sent you that video, and I was like, "Ooh, man, there's some ugliness here that needs to be addressed before anything happens." But a lot of reports coming out of camp, and not from Baylor people. I think it's you got to caveat sometimes reports that come out of camp. People that aren't reporting on Baylor typically are saying DJ Lagway is getting lots of good looks from NFL scouts, and they're coming away really impressed. Like, if people who are at our camp that are U of H media are saying, "Oh yeah, so and so looks good," it's like we kind of want it, right? Like, if I'm at camp, I'm gonna say Connor Wigman looks good, even if he doesn't. Unless he looks terrible, right? He's either a Heisman caliber quarterback or he's going to be benched in game 2. Like, that's kind of how media who covers a team is. But when you hear it from outside media saying they're talking to NFL sources that he looks good. So, but man, those were some, not only were they bad throws where he overthrew and underthrew guys and overled them, he wasn't under much pressure, and he was just making bad decisions. Like, I think of the 16 or 17 interceptions that he threw, he had 5 against LSU. Just an absolutely absurd number. Every one was flanked by 2 or 3 guys. And you're just like, DJ, what are you throwing there, man? Like, what is the process that got you to that point? But all of that being said, he is a former 5-star quarterback, and Lord knows we as Cougar fans know how well a new environment can help a 5-star recruit. We've seen it with Connor Wakeman. So, not saying he's going to become Connor Wakeman, but if he answers this hold question and you hold this stock and it goes up, Baylor might be a little bit better than we possibly think. The sell, though, is the fact that Dave Aranda is still their head coach. if not for Mac Rhodes leaving, quitting, getting fired, going on leave of absence for whatever Mac Rhodes did, I don't think it ever was truly cleared up. Like, there was definitely some alcohol involved, but they were very much adamant that it wasn't a Title IX issue. It wasn't a staffer issue. So, like, but with Baylor, it could also be a bunch of different things, like dancing when he's not supposed to.
I mean, I don't. You're putting me in the awkward position of defending Baylor, but I don't think
I know it's not dancing.
I don't think the parents from Footloose were on the board of Baylor and made the decision for them to cut bait with Mac.
I want to be clear. I didn't actually think
he
got suspended for dancing. No. But if and we talked to a guy from the Waco trip last year, and he was like, "Oh yeah, Aranda would have been gone if it wasn't for Mac Rhodes having to retire, be fired, quit."
Right off into this. Go to the farm.
Sunset.
Go to the farm upstate where athletic directors go.
Yeah. He had to go to Lake Texoma. He had to go to Lake Texoma. I'm sorry. But since that 2021 Big 12 title season that they had, Sam, how many winning seasons has Baylor had in the last 5 years since 2021?
I want to say 2024, 2 seasons ago. Didn't they? That was the
they
only
finished 8-5
because they were 6. Because I believe they were 6-7 the season after the Big 12 title season. Like they made a bowl game and got like waxed by Air Force. I want to say I don't know why that's my memory, but and then the 2024 because I remember we had 2 pick sixes or we had a pick 6 against them in the senior day, and naturally our 2024 Willie Fritz offense 2024 Kevin Barbay offense. Could not do anything of note against the Baylor Bears.
That is correct. It is one, to be fair. And look, Jake Spavital, their offensive coordinator, has given some decent offenses over the last couple of years. The problem during Aranda's tenure has been their terrible defense, which is shocking considering Dave Aranda's past is a really good defensive coordinator. Dave Aranda was a really good coordinator just about everywhere he's been, but their defense has been horror-terror awful. Sam, they had 3 games last year where they kept their opponent to under 30 points. One of those was Samford, not Stanford, Samford, who scored 7. And one of the other ones, so there was 2 others, one of the other 2 was 27 points to the Oklahoma State team. That was horrendous. They gave up 27 to Oklahoma State last year.
That's like giving up 50 to any other team, honestly.
Dude, it's so bad. But Aranda has taken over play calling. He's done all these different things and just nothing has worked. And so you kind of look around and go, how desperate is he? The Lagway signing kind of feels a little bit desperate, but when you have a former 5-star who wants to come and you need some help, but it just doesn't seem like they did a ton defensively to get much better on defense. So I don't see where it's going, and I think the problem is Dave Aranda. I think if you give this roster to Willie Fritz, this team goes 8-4, 9-3. You give this roster to a lot of coaches in the Big 12, and I think they're going to do better than Dave Aranda is going to do this year.
The only thing I would add about them, I'm intrigued by Hosea Wheeler, a guy they brought in who was rotation defensive lineman on that extremely good Indiana defense. He comes in here. I think he'll make them better in the middle, which has been a big weakness of them in recent years. And like you said, as much as I am also not entirely out on Lagway, but I'm somewhere between interested and skeptical. I do think Jake Spavital is a good enough offensive coordinator to get something positive out of him. So I think that's an interesting combination. Certainly any struggles they've had the last 2 seasons have not been because of Jake Spavital's offense. Like they've scored points. Yep. It's been, they just haven't been able to stop a soul. Like certainly not last year, and probably to the detriment of the 8 wins they got 2 seasons ago. Like you pair that offense they had 2 seasons ago with a decent defense, they're probably in contention for the Big 12. Just, the defense was not decent.
Yeah, it's shocking how bad their defense has been, especially under Aranda. I think that's why I went with the hold on Lagway. That offense is pretty good, but man, I think had I not seen that video where they actually broke down all of his interceptions, I'd have been like, yeah, was he really that bad at Florida? Dude, Those interceptions were horrible, man.
And there weren't enough high points either. Like with
Yeah,
Wigman,
exactly.
Wigman's A&M resume, very uneven. Like I won't sugarcoat that, but he also had some high points, like that he won the starting job as a true freshman in Jimbo Fisher's notoriously complex offense. Big positive that he went into his second year as a starting quarterback in that notoriously complex offense. Big positive, even with the ups and downs that he had. Lagway, you didn't really ever see it. Like it felt like more he got the job because, like, okay, well, we brought in this 5-star, like we need to find a way to get him the job here, and he never really put anything together at Florida. But again, with a good offensive coordinator and with that probably not unearned pedigree, interesting to see what that looks like.
I agree.
Bobby, I said I'd ask you one question that you didn't need to prep for, but would be a surprise. I'm going to keep my end of the bargain on this one. And you cannot answer this question, nobody or no one. You ready?
Okay.
If it can't be U of H, who is a Big 12 program who you'd feel happy for if they somehow won the Big 12 football championship this season? You'd be like, yeah, you know what? I feel pretty good for them.
I will my answer to this, no matter what, is always going to be the same, and it's probably TCU. I enjoy interacting with their fans. I enjoy going to those games. I don't hate their fans, right? I haven't had a bad experience in Fort Worth hanging out with TCU people. And so I don't like, I haven't had a ton of bad experiences in Waco with Baylor. If you go on my social media, you can find me in Baylor shirts. I don't hate Baylor as much as I put on. I do love watching their fans melt down. TCU though, like when it comes to Baylor, I don't like watching them win because their fans get super cocky and a lot of them still love Art Briles. What I love about Baylor is watching them lose to watch their fans melt down. Like, I don't hate watching them win. I love watching them lose. TCU, I like watching them win. They are my number 2 favorite team in the Big 12. I generally root for TCU in just about everything they play in. If they played U of H, it's no doubt who I would cheer for, right? But at the end of the day, I would rather cheer for TCU in any sport over a team like Texas Tech, over a team like Baylor, something like that. So I'm going, Central Florida, Cincinnati, something like that. So I'm going to go with TCU. Also, when they're good, Fort Worth's kind of fun, right? When I got to go over to Fort Worth for work, it's a little fun. You get to see the purple and everyone's kind of rocking the TCU stuff. You don't see that all the time. So yeah, that means they're beating SMU, even though they're not playing them this year. Like, it just means more positive for TCU means more negative for SMU. And just overall, I don't hate TCU. I actually enjoy their fans. The restaurants by campus are really good. You can go. They're always running good specials before games. Men's basketball, women's basketball, football. They got good drinks, good food. I enjoy TCU quite a bit.
I think my answer for this one would be Arizona. There are certainly portions of that fan base that probably just bandwagon onto football when they're good and otherwise ignore them to focus on their premier program, men's basketball. But there are people out there who are Arizona Wildcat football diehards, and Bobby, that's not an easy existence. I mean, they've had good seasons, but they never made the Rose Bowl in almost 50 years as a member of the Pac-10/12/8. Their one conference title winning season, 1993, was a shared title because of head-to-heads, and they had to play in the Fiesta Bowl instead of the Rose. So as much as we would both infinitely prefer the Cougs in any situation, I'd feel happy for the not insignificant number of Arizona people who live and die with the football program that we'll just say hasn't always been a consistent winner. The fans have been cool both times I've gone to games there. I remember it wasn't a huge crowd, but when we were playing them 2 seasons ago, 2 teams that were not good and not really playing for anything of significance, I was impressed with the amount of crowd they had there. Like, it wasn't huge, but there were probably 35 to 40,000 butts and seats, probably somewhere splitting the difference of that at the stadium. And there would not be 35 to 40,000 U of H fans if we were having the kind of season that Arizona was having 2 seasons ago. So I'd feel good for them. I thought about what my answer would be to this when I put it on here, and I landed in Arizona.
Don't hate it.
So we'll return to the world of Cougar sports for our next topic, previewing the 2026 Houston Cougar volleyball season as we get to the later stages of August. And soon we will have all fall sports back in action. This is one of our favorite teams and head coaches of the last handful of years, but also undeniably a team right now that is badly in need of a turnaround season. Yeah, it had the 2 straight NCAA tournament seasons in 22 and 23, by far the 2 best seasons we've seen from this program in both of our 20-ish years as Cougar fans, easily the best 2 teams this century. And I can speak for both of us when I say we really admire teams who accomplish things that have been accomplished in a long time. And that's what those Cougar volleyball teams did. But the trend line from the past 2 seasons isn't good. 2 seasons ago, you lost 6 of your final 7 matches to finish below 500 for the first time since David Rare's first season. And quite honestly, the program bottomed out last season, lost 20 matches, finished tied for the worst record in the Big 12. I think saying the standard here is that you have to be every bit as good as the 22 and 23 teams every season isn't realistic for what gets poured into this program resource-wise. But I'm also confident I could speak for everyone involved here that 2025 was way below the expectations around these parts. This is why the coaching staff looks pretty different. This is why the roster certainly looks a lot different than it did a season ago. And as we'll get to when we dive into the specifics in this team, there's a good case to be made for improvement. But we're also at the point where we need to see it. Not that I'm cynical about this team necessarily, but I remember that I thought in each of the past 2 off seasons, or in the preseasons, I guess, when they did the preseason poll, I saw where they put U of H, and I was just like, this team isn't getting enough respect in each of the prior 2 seasons. And hand up, I was wrong about the team's prospects in both of those seasons. Bobby, where's your head on this team?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the best season. Like you said, you gave all the reasons why it was not a good season at all for this team. But I think the team may have wanted and needed a pretty hard restart. And it certainly seems, going through the roster, it's pretty crazy to see every upperclassman. Now, granted, a couple have been here for a couple of years. But pretty much every upperclassman has played at another school at some point in their career, except for Lily Barron. Even if they transferred after their freshman year and now they're juniors or seniors, something like that. But it's very rare in volleyball. Not that transfer portal hasn't hit every sport or anything like that, but it is pretty crazy to think that all of your upperclassmen have played at another school at some point. I think you're taking some chances with the amount of transfers that you brought in this year. I kind of said that in the bold predictions that, like, who's going to carry the flame for this culture and things like that. But you're definitely taking some chances with those transfers. Like I said, I'm hoping this is more of a reset and less of a coach who could really use a good season getting desperate. I can't remember a season in which you lost so many matches with sets so close, as many times as you did last year, and you saw them lose those sets by 2 or have a critical run against them. You are your record, but man, to be honest, they kind of felt better than the record ended up showing. You played some good teams really close, but overall, man, yeah, the record is what the record is, and that kind of sucks. And so, yeah, hopefully these transfers pan out.
Yeah, you're definitely relying on that a lot with this roster. We decided for this year's preview to look at the roster roughly split into the offensive and defensive components, which will mean looking specifically for the offense at the outside hitter and center position groups, as those are your primary offensive contributors and creators respectively, in addition to just general offensive thoughts. I'll pass off to you here first, but the most obvious takeaway, and how I'm going to throw it to you, is that this team has to improve dramatically at serve and serve receive. You're never the result. It is never the result of one problem that you're 2-16 in conference, but there was no problem bigger for last year's Cougar team than serve and serve receive.
Yeah, I mean, I hate the idea, like you said, of breaking a season down to one stat, but it's really hard not to with this team. You had 282 service errors over 29 games. You compare that with your opponents having 250, that's 32. I wasn't a math major at U of H by any means, but I can do 282 minus 250 is 32. On a team that lost a bunch of sets by the minimum amount of 2, 1 point per match is the difference. Like, it can make a massive, massive difference. So
just giving away.
Yeah, you just give that away. And then I have this kind of on the defensive side, but your return stats weren't good either. You couldn't return serves and you couldn't get serves inbounds or over the net. It strictly comes down to that stat. Yes, you could have hit better in conference. You hit 172, I want to say, in conference. I don't have it written down here, but I know it was in the 170s. You could definitely have a better hit percentage. You were out hitting conference play. But man, if you get balls over the net or in the lines, you possibly pull off a couple of upsets. So, just improving that this year. And it's not like we need to sit here and we're saying something that the coaching staff didn't notice or didn't pay attention to. I remember last year about halfway through trying to figure out, because I was looking at points scored and kills, and I was like, man, our kill numbers are just as good as the other teams. Like, I was looking at TCU, who was really good last year, and I was just like, man, offensively, we're doing really good. What is it? And then you just go through the play-by-play, and you're just like, oh, we're up 22-20, and we got the serve, and then you service error into the net, 22-21, and then they pick up a point, you're tied all of a sudden, and now you're just trying to kill a rally, and they get going, all because of something you did. It's a classic example, like if you're watching baseball, right? And there's you get 2 outs, you're about to close the game out, there's an error, and then next thing you know, bloop single, boom. It with like the Bartman, not to go back too far, but like everyone blames Bartman for that situation. They had an error like the next batter, and then they give up the hit. Like, things just build when you have little unforced errors like that, especially ones off the serve. It just kills any momentum that you have, and the other team just has a ton of momentum based off of it.
The good news of the serving is that you can make a good case for some of the players on this roster being much better than what you had. Lily Barron, who's back after missing all of last season injured, had one of the better serving seasons in this program 2 years ago as a freshman. Callie Addison, your likely starting setter, also was one of the best servers on Auburn both of the seasons she competed for the Tigers. Olivia Stringer was really good serving for Blinn last year as well. Time will tell what improvement we see, but I can talk myself into it. One of the things that I believe most bolsters any optimistic case you want to make about the 2026 Cougar volleyball team is the depth that this team could have at outside hitter. Like most of the team, largely made up of players who were on the roster a season ago. Probably the most intriguing to me is Noemi Espana, comes in from Georgia Tech, played for that Tech program who's in a really difficult ACC. Like, you have national powers, Pitt, Louisville, SMU, and Stanford among the teams you got to play on a week in, week out basis. In that league, that team she was on made the NCAA tournament, and she started 22 of the Yellow Jackets' 26 matches, was third on the team in kills and kills per set, third in blocks as well, tied for fifth most digs as well, which speaks some promise as a two-way player, like some of the really good Cougar outside hitters of the recent past, like Abby Jackson and Kenna Sauer, who definitely impacted the game defensively as well. You also have Sydney Jones, who was the AAC Freshman of the Year in 2024 at Temple. Played a bit less last year when she was at Tennessee, but was definitely part of the rotation on a really good team. Camille Gibson played a bunch for Oklahoma last season, was an elite recruit at one time in her career. And my wild card is Olivia Stringer, was a first-team junior college All-American at Blinn, arguably the best offensive player in all of junior college last season. Certainly due to take a sizable step up in competition to D1 in the Big 12 this season, but is also probably now coming with a lot more confidence than she did 2 seasons ago, coming into college as a freshman at A&M Corpus. You also have Alyssa Gonzalez back from last year's team. She led all the players who could have returned this season in kills and kills per set. Mentioned Lily Barron earlier. We're talking about the need for improvement on the serve. She's an intriguing one to watch as well. Tara Greenberry is back for her sophomore season, played the most of any freshman outside hitter on last season's team. Not nothing that the staff clearly judged her good enough to come back. So I named a lot of players, but the good news is you don't need all of them to be standouts. Great problem to have if they all did prove to be as good or better than the preseason expectations, but odds are that probably won't happen. Maybe wish casting my part, and the last 2 teams certainly had offensive players I was excited about when we previewed the season, but I don't believe either of the last 2 teams had a group this large of incoming and returning outside hitters who all had a good case for coming in here and contributing and being quality players. And to me, that's why I'm most excited about this team.
Yeah, I think outside hitter wise, you mentioned a lot of really good players here that I have in my notes. like you said, I think we're going to see a good mix of players at outside hitter. You have a lot of talent here. Alyssa Gonzalez, as you mentioned, returns after a pretty good season last year. Of any possible returners, she came back. You also get Lily Barron back. Kind of feels like a transfer. You may remember her from 2 years ago as a promising freshman. She was one of the better players on that team from a couple of years ago. I don't always love to base who I think is going to be playing a ton off of who gets sent to media days or anything like that. But I do think it's telling that transfer outside hitter Camille Gibson was sent to media days. She comes over from a pretty decent OU squad. She hit 172 in a really, really tough SEC. A lot of top-notch teams there. A player that may not play a ton, but one to watch is Olivia Stringer. She started at Texas A&M Corpus, went down to the JUCO ranks at Blinn last year, and played really, really well. You look at some of her stats; she played really well against, admittedly, community college talent, but I like to see that kind of bounce back player who realizes maybe they need to go somewhere else. Who I didn't hear the story of why she went down to Blinn or anything like that, but she played a decent amount at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Maybe decided let's go to the JUCO ranks. Who knows what happened there, but yeah, watch out for her. She may not be an every match starter or anything crazy like that, but the resume looks really solid based on what I've kind of seen stat wise from there.
Yeah, I would agree there. The other reason for optimism with the offense is setter, where you have a really proven player I mentioned a bit ago, Callie Edison. Edson. I really want to autocorrect it in my brain to Edison.
I've done it. I wrote it in my journal here as Edison.
Callie Edson comes in from Auburn, split the reps at the position last season, took about probably 45% of the reps with her teammate Chanel Puetz, and I would imagine is coming in here because she will be the Cougs' go-to at the position. The only other setter on the roster is a freshman. She helped organize a really good offensive attack at Auburn. I believe Dustin mentioned this in our season opening bold predictions episode when we talked about volleyball, but the Auburn team last season set the modern program record for hitting percentage. So it was a really efficient offense, and some of the credit there has to go to the setter as the player on the court who's really organizing the offense, who's really setting up your best attacking players. And last season, the Cougs either had a freshman or a veteran player who was playing her first season of big conference volleyball at the position. So I have a hard time not seeing Edson being a major upgrade at the position that's so important. That's the equivalent of the quarterback in football or the point guard in basketball. It is not the reason you fell back the last 2 seasons. I mean, 2 seasons you still had Andy Cook, who was a big contributor on the 2 NCAA tournament teams that we mentioned at the top of this preview. But I think there's a good case to be made that Edson gives you more than any setter has given you at the position since the last time this team made the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I think you and Dustin did a interview with Coach Ray a couple of years ago, and it really made me learn how important the center position is in volleyball. He was running the 2 setter kind of system at that time, and the reasons why he said it, I learned a lot from that interview. So, but yeah, I think center position will be Kylie Edson. Look, I almost did it there too. Actually, I had Eason as well. That is one that I have slipped up and done here as well. Like you said, she comes over from Auburn where she played for the last 2 years. Thing that kind of caught my eye: 19 aces in 28 matches.
Yeah.
If nothing else, the service errors should be lower. Her freshman year, Sam, did you see how many aces she had her freshman year at Auburn?
I think it was 30.
Led the team with 30.
That'll
all
play.
of that to say, she should be a great replacement this year. Even if she doesn't have 19 aces or 30 aces, the ball's going to make it over the net. The ball's going to stay in play. You're limiting the errors there. And then, like you said, quarterback on the field for a really good Auburn team, offense. She was kind of running it like the quarterback, and all of her assist numbers looked really good. Everything looked really good on what I saw. So super excited to see her this year in Cougar Red. She also was somebody who was sent to media days, so clearly some leadership being shown there by her They wanted to send her to media days, and you need that leadership out of your center.
So I believe we've successfully talked ourselves into the offense, but you've also got to defend. And I don't know if there are as many answers to the questions that you would have there as there were with the more offensive components of this team. I do love the addition of 50-year Alexis Roberson from TCU at middle blocker. Will likely play a bigger role in this team than she did for the Horned Frogs, but she played a lot for probably the best two teams TCU has had since they moved to the Big 12 over a decade ago, and now comes in here playing maybe a little bit bigger role. And you saw the Cougs really suffer the last 2 seasons for not having Kellen Morin, your awesome middle blocker, who was a starter on the last NCAA tournament team here, healthy for very much of the past 2 seasons, missed all of 2 seasons ago, and then missed a decent chunk of last season. Really, you could almost trace Morin's injury this past season to the team really falling off a cliff in 2025. Roberson also started 13 matches as a freshman before her TCU career at LSU. I think Roberson can give you the level of performance at the position that you were sorely missing. An established veteran at the net who has also shown that she could be a very efficient offensive player in her college career as well. Hit well over 300 for the Horned Frogs last season. The problem is there's basically nobody else listed on the roster as a middle blocker who has big conference college experience. It's either freshmen or players who to this point have been, you'd say, career backups in college. So it's kind of a guessing game. I'm keeping an eye on freshman Ava Wilkerson and Harmony Dobbins to maybe see some action alongside Robertson, but I really don't know, other than Alexis Robertson, who is going to be seeing action for you at middle blocker. Libero is also a question mark. I mean, you knew going to last season after Kate Georgiadis graduated that it would be incredibly difficult to replace her. Still definitely an area, though, where the Cougs struggled last season. Your top 2 options coming to this season are 2 sophomores, Jillian Pitts, who comes back from last year's team and was second on the Cougs in digs and digs per set, with her top competition being Maddie Casale, who transfers over after 1 season at Purdue. If you don't know, I know Bobby here does from watching them face U of H a couple of years ago in Dallas. Purdue is an elite program, and simply the fact that Casale was a good enough recruit to be judged worthy of playing for Purdue intrigues me. And if she didn't see the court last season as a freshman, also worth noting, Pitts was a really high-end high school volleyball recruit at the DFW Metroplex as well. I expect early in the season, though maybe I'm wrong, especially in your less challenging non-conference matches, that we'll see both Pitts and Casale get some time out there. But I think you have to say, Bobby, a lot of questions in these 2 areas. And we talked about this, the serving and the serve receive. Serve receive also wasn't good for you last year, and you don't have as many clear answers there as to how it will get better in 2026, other than hoping for improvement from the players in this roster.
Yeah, I think you said a lot of the same names I was going to say. I will say, just to kind of focus back in on Alexa Roberson, probably our most exciting transfer this year, one that I'm really excited for, has shown a lot of talent, played for a top 10 TCU team last year, as you mentioned. This wasn't a case where she played sparingly, where they kind of had her in here and there. She was a real contributor, playing in every match. She played in every match for TCU last year. She should come in and be an instant spark. One name that I don't think you mentioned, maybe I didn't hear it, but Caitlin Evans from Loyola Marymount, getting a pretty big step up in competition coming into the Big 12 from Loyola Marymount, but played well there. And she should be a decent amount of help, like you said. Outside of those 2, you have some younger players, but I wouldn't be surprised to see those 2 really playing quite a bit for the Cougs this year. And then at libero, it seems I might be a little bit higher on the libero position. One that has been traditionally recruited pretty well by the staff. No one's Kate Georgiadis, but you're hoping Maddie Casale becomes that. She was the number 1 libero recruit in the country, so it's not like she was not a good player. As you said, I actually have it written here as well. Purdue's a real I'm not concerned that she didn't play at Purdue her freshman year. Kind of looked at it, and if she's good enough for Purdue, I like her. She's good enough for the Cougs, in my opinion. Purdue, a traditional power in volleyball. If I'm being picky, I would have loved to see her play last year, but if she were getting a ton of playing time at Purdue, she's probably not a Houston Cougar right now. Purdue returns a second team All Big Ten libero who heading into this year will be a junior. So if you're going to stay at Purdue, you're going to sit behind somebody this year and next year, hoping to play your senior year.
3 years now because it's the 5-5.
Yeah, great point. So yeah, you're kind of just hoping that you can sit around and wait and get lucky and do that. So totally see why she would want to transfer. One of the things that made me get a little bit excited about the signing as well is it's not like she's from the Houston area, right? Like it would make sense and maybe you get a little bit of a discount or maybe you're the program that fits if she's from the Houston area or from Texas, right? You see that with football quite a bit. And it's actually a big benefit to most sports is you can just look around and find a lot of talent in this state. And sure, you want to go off to Purdue and play volleyball and you can and then you can come home if it doesn't work out and we'll take that bounce back kind of person, that bounce back kind of player. She's not that. She's from North Carolina. She could have gone to another school. And so it gives me a little bit of hope that she saw what we're doing here. Rare probably had to recruit her pretty hard and against schools closer to home for her. So kind of gives me excited to see some real recruiting there from Rare to get such a high quality player as well.
Yeah, and we'll say we didn't see Kate Georgiadis until her second year in college. As you recall, she played her first season at TCU and then transferred to the Cougs for her second college season, which that's what both Pitts and Casale are about to enter. So I don't think it's impossible that we see a pretty sizable step up from either of those players going from their first season playing any kind of college volleyball to the second. And yeah, I think you make a case for Casale specifically. My last big picture thought on Cougar volleyball before we take a quick look at the opening match of the season is I just want 2026 to be a noticeable enough step back to where U of H used to be. The department leadership can look at this and say, yeah, David Rare is still the guy to run this program going forward. Going from last in the conference to the NCAA tournament in one season is probably too big of a leap, but I'd be perfectly happy this season where, of course, the team is much more competitive against Big 12 opponents than it was last season. And maybe the most important, that you look like a better volleyball team in October and November than you do in late August. Because nearly all the players we've talked about tonight could come back for 2027. And assuming too much continuity isn't too smart when you do what we do here in this day and age when transfer movement's never been more easy. But if the pieces come together and the on-court product looks better, you could see the multi-year vision here. We've talked about it with women's basketball under Matthew Mitchell a lot, and the multi-year vision that we see for that program. You could see the multi-year vision if all these pieces click. No guarantee they come together, but certainly hope they do. And I certainly think you can make a case that they do. And you get a team that can play with a chip on their shoulder. You were picked 14th out of 15 in the conference. They keep scoring the games for a reason. Prove the haters wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely see this team. This is one of the few teams where I hate to say I don't know what to expect, but I wouldn't be shocked if this team is competing to go to the NCAA tournament. I also wouldn't be shocked if this team goes 9-20 again. I mean, I would be a little shocked if they were. I do think this team is better than last year's team just on pure raw talent, but it wouldn't shock me if this team wins 10 games. But I also wouldn't be shocked if this team's head near the top of the Big 12. Not saying that they're going to compete with a team like TCU was last year or anything like that. But yeah, I wouldn't be shocked either way in this situation.
So the Cougars will be opening the 2026 season at the LSU home tournament in Baton Rouge on Friday and Saturday, as is often the case with early season neutral site tournaments. U of H's matches won't be streamed as we're not playing the host team. If we were playing LSU, you could probably get it on broadcast, but I think we actually in 2022 we played in this opening weekend and at least got that one on some kind of stream. Unfortunately, though, as I've been itching to actually see this team in action, we won't be able to see the Cougs in this event, but should be able to at least watch them next week when they open their home schedule. Opener will be on Friday at 3 p.m. against Incarnate Word. The Cardinals were one of the better teams in the Southland Conference last season, but graduated all of their top offensive players from last season. They do return the organizer of their offense, though, two-time All-Southland setter Calissa Allison. And the second year 2 matches in Baton Rouge will be Saturday at 1 p.m. against Wake Forest. And this is an interesting test because the Demon Deacons were a bottom half of the ACC team last year, but still well above the dregs of that league. They were 9-11 when it was all said and done in conference play. Certainly a winnable match, but probably a better opponent than the Cougs were last season. So I think a win here. I think it's you'll only have 2 matches regardless, so you can't really make any big determinations based on what happens this weekend. But if you could beat Wake Forest, that's a nice first test checked, a first chance to say, hey, this team could actually be better than they were a season ago if you could find a way to beat the Demon Deacons in Baton Rouge.
Yep, you just want to come out and look good in these matches. You'd love to win against Incarnate Word and Wake Forest, but really, I'm much more interested in how this team just looks. How much, are you getting service? A ton of service errors. How's your hitting percentage? Like, those are kind of the things that I'm more interested in, and who plays a decent amount. I think you are going to have that as well.
We'll close tonight with an update on Cougar Soccer, who grabbed a couple of expected but still quite dominant home wins since we last talked about them here, and look ahead to another road trip to somewhere you were actually very recently, Bobby, and a really pivotal home non-conference matchup this coming weekend. The best thing I could say about those 2 dominant wins I just mentioned is that I don't have nearly as many notes on them as the season opener against Florida Gulf Coast. We'll also note Florida Gulf Coast, since we last saw them, went and beat LSU in Baton Rouge. So not that this surprised us, but I think certainly a quality opponent we got to see in the opener. First 2 minutes of the opener against Northwestern State at home, you got on the board thanks to a Samira Minor finishing a scramble in front of the goal. Daniel Shannon scored her first career Cougar goal in the 26th minute. And then Samira Minor knocked a penalty off of a Northwestern State handball in the box to put the Cougs up 3-0. And not that you or I had much doubt at 2-0, but that one really well and truly put this game on ice. Cougs added 4th and 5th goals in the first 12 minutes of the second half, even as Williams really subbed liberally in the last 30 minutes of this game. Visitors never came close to scoring. Just the dominant effort you would have hoped for when we previewed this game.
Yeah, there was. I got to have the pleasure of turning the game off after a little bit. Whenever your team starts to dominate like that, and you can go do other things, it's a nice added benefit here.
Yeah. I had a Korean barbecue date night that was I knew it was gonna land around halftime, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not moving this for soccer versus Northwestern State, but I would love if I could leave the house and U of H had commanding a lead, and literally Samira Minor slotted home the penalty as I was putting on my shoes to leave the house. I was like, all right, put my hands up. I did the little dusting my hands. Like, all right, I think we got things in hand here.
Yep,
I think we got this thing handled.
And it's kind of one of those situations that you're up 3-0 and you're like, if we do blow this, I don't want to be watching. Like, I don't.
Yeah, I'll go back and see how it happened because I'm obligated to as someone who hosts a podcast about this team. But yeah,
I do not want to.
I do not want to watch it happen live. The home win on Sunday over Charleston was mostly the same story. To take the Cougs a bit longer to put their outmatched visitors down by multiple goals. You were only, air quotes, only up 1-0 at the half thanks to an opposite corner of the goal shot by Bailey Kate. Got her second goal in as many contests. Skylar Miller got the Cougs up multiple goals about 5 minutes into the second half, getting her second goal in as many games, cleaning up a ball that the Charleston goalie couldn't get out of harm's way from a Cougar chance a few seconds prior, slotted it home. Elle Sloan also became the first Cougar freshman to score in 2026 on a nice diving header off of a really, really good cross down the left wing by Lainey Gonzalez, getting the assist. I'll note that Tarleton's one goal came in the final few minutes against a group of mostly backups. Oddly enough, kind of against the run of play, Tarleton actually, not that they had a ton of chances in this one, but they actually had some possession and some chances on goal in the first half, and that one kind of came out of nowhere. But Cougs very much kept a clean sheet in this one while you had your starters in, and while this was anything close to a remotely in doubt game, which I think was the goal coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. You just wanted to see the win here. I was unfortunately traveling out to where the Cougs' next game is, but went back, kind of watched some of the highlights, just kind of fast forwarded through the game, and was expected. When would you love to to shut them out, sure. But yeah, at the end of the day, a 4-1 win is pretty good, man.
Yeah, you're limited in how much you could take away from playing two outmatched opponents, but you would have hoped that goal scoring wouldn't be difficult. Check, both games there. And you would have hoped that you have defended every bit as well as you have hoped after looking pretty good doing that in the opener. Definitely did that as well. Up next, the Cougars will go somewhere. You said you were just visiting the hometown of Cougar legend Case Keenum, the heart of big country, Abilene, Texas, to play Abilene Christian University. Coming off a 2025 season where they're well below 500 and at bottom half of the WAC team. Scoreless in their first two games at home, which probably doesn't bode super well for them upsetting the Cougars. Have only conceded one goal, but I think for the Cougars, the test for this one is just don't let this one get into like the 60th or 65th minute and you're still looking for that goal against a team that does have some defensive chops, because that's when you start sweating. You're the team that's expected to win this, and I'd imagine Abilene Christian is going to pack it in, play pretty deep, and try to make it a low scoring kind of game where maybe they could steal a goal at the end rather than play real open and give the Cougs lots of attacking chances. So I think you really take pressure off yourself, get that early goal, and then let Abilene Christian maybe get out of their comfort zone and commit players forward, and then maybe nick a third or a second or third goal from their defensive vulnerability there. But getting that first goal, I think that's going to be the key there.
Yeah, I think kind of looking through their two games that they've played, that's absolutely got to be the big goal there is just get it get one in the net. They're going to park the bus against you. Get one in the net, and let's do what you just said. Wipe our hands clean of this game. Get out of there with a win, and score early, and then just do what your team does best and play some good defense.
We'll be back at home on Sunday, getting maybe your stiffest test the entire season, certainly the stiffest test of non-conference play. Number 3, Vandy, comes to Houston. Last time they were in action, they walloped top 25 Memphis 4-1 in Nashville, and they've scored 4 goals in each of their opening 3 games of the season, including an opening night 4-3 win over a usually pretty good SMU team. This is the acid test of this, I think, improved defense. This defense that we think is going to be very good. Not saying if Vandy finds the goal against you that means your defense still isn't legitimately good. I mean, this might be the best goal scoring team in the country, certainly one of the best handful. But if you can hold them to 1 or 2 goals, or even, dare I dream it, keep a clean sheet, that you're gonna come out of the game feeling incredible. You're gonna be like, oh man, if we can defend against this team, oh yeah, like there's nobody in conference play, even with some good Big 12 soccer teams, there's nobody who's going to present more of a challenge than Vandy. Just obviously doing it's going to be a challenge. And this road trip they're taking to Houston, this won't be their first game away from Nashville, because they're going to be playing Rice on Thursday or Friday, part of this Houston road swing they're doing. But we'll know, like their offensive dominance has come entirely at home to this point, and I think you'll get to see, can they take it on the road to Houston? Can they do it at 12 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon in Houston? I know Nashville gets very hot. I'm sure their team is prepared for the heat, but the Houston Heat can make cowards of us all, and I think that might be the a needed thing that's going to happen if the Cougars are going to pull the upset here.
Yeah, I think this is a game where you probably don't expect to win, but it's going to be a real litmus test. Vanderbilt is ranked number 3 in the country. Coming into your place, like you said, they're doing a nice road trip with Rice being involved here as well. But you get them, maybe they're a little tired, but overall, if you give up 1 or 2 here and you keep it close, and heading into the 80th minute you're within a goal, I think you're pretty happy with that, and that tells you quite a bit about what you're going to see in conference with this team. So overall, I'm actually really excited for this game, not because I think we're going to absolutely pull off the upset, but it's your first real test of the year to see what this team actually is.
No doubt. We'll also mention, this broke, I think, while we were recording, but shout out Derek Parrish, who just got a deal with the Houston Texans, will be joining them in training camp. I know they've had some injuries to the defensive line as well, so one of the better Cougar pass rushers in recent memory, guy who was who always plays his ass off for us, who I think we're excited to see play for the hometown Texans.
Yeah, man, really excited just for the grind that he kind of went through playing in the UFL.
Yep.
And I think he played Canadian football as well. Just, that's kind of the dream that undrafted guys and guys who are picked in lower rounds or in those later rounds dream of, right? When you go to the CFL or you go to the UFL, your dream wasn't to play in the UFL or the CFL. It's a great way to make some money. You're going to love it. But at the end of the day, you want to play in the NFL, and he signed a contract. He's gonna play for the hometown Houston Texans. Super excited for that.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, well, I think that is it for this week's episode of the Scott Holman Podcast, Sam. We want to thank everybody who has listened to an hour and 40 minutes worth of Cougar Talk. I think we have a couple of little edits in there. It's going to take it pretty close to an hour 40 either way, though. Super, super thankful for you guys for having us here in our 12th season. And if you have any feedback for us, we'd love to hear it. Good, positive, negative, bad, whatever the feedback is, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on social media at SH Podcast. You can find us on Blue Sky at podcast.bsky.social. And you can find us on Patreon as well if you want to throw a couple of dollars at us. You can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/shpodcast. And if you want to send us an email, I almost forgot about this one, Sam. If you want to send us an email, you can find us at shpodcast@gmail.com. And since we're still fairly early on in the season and someone may be listening for the first time, all of those are podcast PAWD because it's the Cougar Paw. For those of you who haven't been around here for a while, it's PAWD. CAST. So if you're looking for us POD, you're not going to find us PAWDCAST. So you can find us in all those locations. We want to thank you guys so much for listening. And Sam, what do we always say?
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs! Let's go!